take the reading from this morning's gospel seriously. You know all the jokes and all the ways that it keeps running through my mind. That old song, 5'9", Palestine changes water into wine. He's so cool, he can walk across the water on your swimming pool. Has anybody seen my Lord? Now I can get that out of my head. Put that over there. When we read the Gospels, one of the commentators I was looking at kind of suggested, brought this to mind. When we read the Gospels, we need to remember that we are sitting here as 21st century folk reading these Gospels, these accounts, these things. And they were not written in order to be picked apart by us 2,000 years later, as though they were written according to our life and our experience and our standards. The Gospels were written, the scholars tell us, between 70 and 100 AD. Which means that's only about 50 to 70 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. I don't know about you, but many of you remember 50 years ago. Some of you may remember 70 years ago. And so the Gospels being written are not all that distant from the things that happened. But even with that, the Gospels are not just an impartial, mechanical recording of events. And nobody was walking around with body cams. Hey, hold on, Jesus, just a minute. Let me get my camera going. Catch this. But rather, the Gospels are a sharing of the experiences of people whose lives were changed. Of people who came to know and who came to say and who came to believe, truly, this is the Son of God. And so in the Gospels, they're saying why we believe that. Here's what my experience was. Here's what I saw. Here's what I learned. Here's what happened. And it's from the perspective of folk of that time. So we turn to Matthew. The actual text in front of me, so I don't do anything wrong here. Turn to Matthew. So what's happening here, this reading starts out immediately. You get that a lot in the Gospels. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat. They have just finished feeding the 5,000. If you remember, if you're paying attention last week, I'm sure you were, that the disciples had come to Jesus and say, tell these people to go out to the McDonald's and get some food because we got nothing here. And Jesus says, no, they don't have to leave. You feed them. Jesus takes the bread, says the blessing, says grace, gives it back to them and says, here, go feed them. And they did. And so their heads are still spinning from trying to process what the heck just happened. And Jesus says to them, go get in the boat while I dismiss the crowds. Why? Why didn't Jesus say, stay here and help me, shake hands and say goodbye to the congregation? He says, you go get in the boat. Go get in the boat, he commanded them, and go to the other side. I'm staying here to dismiss the crowd. Why? Maybe it was Jesus said, you know, they've been through a lot. They really need some time on their own. They need to be on their own. Or they need to exercise a little more independence. And so he sends them out in the boat without him. So this is not like the time when he was sleeping in the back of the boat and he calmed the storm. They're out in the boat by themselves. Perhaps he sent them away to give them some time to think about what just happened with the loaves and the fish. Maybe he sent them out in the boat just to get them out of the way while he was dealing with the crowds. Because as we read through the Gospels, we find the disciples are always trying to get between Jesus and the people that are trying to get to Jesus. He says, don't you off. Or maybe Jesus was setting up a test for them. I hate tests. You may love tests. I hate tests. I've always hated tests. For whatever reason, I've always got the feeling that tests, whether they're in school or questions your dad asks you or any kind of a test like that, is always meant to try to trap you into making a mistake and getting it wrong. But tests are given, in theory, in order to help us to learn. So we have two approaches to the test. One is I approach the test with fear of failing, or I can approach the test as saying, here's a challenge to help me learn more. I'd like to say that I've adopted the challenge of learning approach, but I can't lie up here. I still hate tests. And so the stage is set for the disciples. The disciples are out in the boat without Jesus, in the dark, rowing against the wind. It said the waves were battering the boat. The Greek word that's translated there is tormenting the boat. More on that next week. Tormenting the boat. And they're thinking about Jesus and the feeding of the 5,000, and the wind is blowing and the waves are going. It's not a storm, it's a typical rough night on the Sea of Galilee. And I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of them was thinking, you know, this would be a whole lot easier if Jesus was here to tell the wind to stop, like last time. And suddenly, they look up and they see Jesus walking toward them on the water. And so they're thinking, this is not possible. No human can walk on water. Anybody here can walk on water that's not already frozen? Any hands? Anyone can walk on water that's not frozen? No, I can't. Sorry, not me. Can't do it. But you know who can walk on water? Ghosts. It's ghosts. It must be a ghost pretending to be Jesus. It's a trap. Now, in their minds, and possibly in ours, if we were in the same situation, the ghost theory makes a whole lot more sense than what was really happening. And so they cry out in terror. it's not good to see a ghost walking towards you on the water. I'm sure. I haven't had that experience, but I'll take it for granted, but that's not a good thing. And then Jesus says to them, take heart. Do not be afraid. Which, if we're being logical, and we're going with the ghost theory, that is exactly what a ghost pretending to be Jesus would say. Yup, it's me! Peter then says, Lord, if it is you, and not a ghost, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. What an odd thing to ask. He's not asking this person he sees, whom he's trying to determine whether it's a ghost or Jesus. He doesn't say, do something. He says, tell me to do something. Tell me to do something. He says, I'm ready to test you. I'm ready to take action and risk everything to know what's going on. Now, some commentators have suggested that Peter's challenge, if it is you, is similar to the challenge that Jesus faced when he was being tempted by the devil in the wilderness. And the devil says, if you are the Son of God, make this happen, call down the angels, so forth. Similar to the challenge of the high priest at his trial. If you are the Messiah, save yourself. Or the two thieves crucified on either side of him, taunting him, saying, well, if you're so fancy, get yourself down. Get us down too while you're at it. But I don't think that's quite right. It says that the disciples saw him walking on the sea, and they thought it was a ghost. And Peter's request or challenge to this vision, Peter starts out saying, Lord. He doesn't start out saying, hey, you ghost, prove you're the Lord. Right? Jesus, Peter's all in with this. He says, Lord. He recognizes Jesus. Or he thinks that he is seeing Jesus. But he's afraid that it may not be Jesus, but rather a ghost, a specter, a vision. Peter does not say, if you are the Son of God. Peter says, if it is you, and I really want it to be you. I really need to know that it's you. If it is you, Peter is not asking that Jesus prove his divinity, but is asking that the ghost prove that he is Jesus. Peter is not doubting Jesus. He is doubting his own senses. Don't know what to think here. Peter does not ask Jesus to make him able to walk on water. Peter said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. He may be saying, I'll trust you. I'll take the risk to do what you say. If it's a ghost, Peter knows he will sink. But if it's Jesus, he is sure mostly sure that he will be okay. And Jesus says, come. Jesus does not calm the storm. Peter does not assure Peter that he will be able to walk on the water. Jesus just says, come. And Peter gets out of the boat and comes toward Jesus, taking a few steps on the water. And then his own senses, which he doubted, are now telling him he has a problem. He hears the wind, he sees the waves, the water sprays in his face, he is frightened and begins to sink. Notice he does not thrash around or try to get back to the boat. He cries out, Lord, save me. He is sure that this is not a ghost. Lord, save me. Peter is convinced that this is indeed his friend and Lord. And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him. A fish. Reached out his hand and caught him. And then Matthew's gospel says, Jesus says to him, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And I'm not sure exactly what Jesus means here. Was Peter doubting that it was Jesus they saw walking on the water? Was Peter doubting that he was able to come to Jesus on the water? Was Peter torn between relying on Jesus or relying on himself? This phrase, "O ye of little faith, why did you doubt me?" sounds like the testing to catch you in an error kind of setup. I gotcha, Peter. But I don't think that's how Jesus would operate. We often imagine that when Jesus says, you of little faith, why did you doubt? That he is criticizing people. Perhaps even being harsh. I suggest to you that it might be better to see this as more of a gentle, loving, teaching moment. Peter needed to know that it was Jesus, and he risked everything to be sure. But he slipped. And don't we all? Perhaps Jesus is acknowledging the challenge that Peter faces. Peter is struggling with the real work of processing what was really happening. Of his experience with Jesus, the teaching, the miracles, of the challenges to everything that Peter thought he knew and could rely on, being turned upside down by his friend Jesus. And through his testing, Peter is slowly coming to understand that Jesus is not just a guy with godlike powers, but truly is God made flesh, fully God, fully human, all the time. Jesus is testing to teach. this walking on water is not to prove that he is God, but is for Peter and is for us a test and an invitation to faith. When we hear Jesus say, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Perhaps the sentiment is more, my friend Peter, you have a little faith. There is no need to doubt.